Hi everybody and welcome to SA Rugby Magazine. I've got Mark Keohane with me. Mark, how are you doing, bud?
Very good. Cold, but other than that,
It's been a
excellent.
cold winter in Cape Town. In Cape Town. Whew.
Sure. We're into September and it's kind of bucketing with rain and 12 degrees.
12. You must live in a warm part of Cape Town.
I do, right in the city centre. I know where you are, Newlands, coldest part of Cape
It
Town.
is cold there. Whew. Anyway, Mark, we've been chatting about what the Boks are going to do and what's going to happen to Super Rugby for some time. I think through osmosis the picture's getting clearer because of the time constraints in making a decision and honouring broadcast deals or making some money from broadcast revenue. A lot of conflicting stories in a website that I own, SA Rugby Magazine, this weekend. You got Bernard Laporte that says that South Africa are going to be chatting and playing in a 8 nations. You've got Andy Marinos rubbishing that and saying it's pure speculation, and at the same breath saying that the Super Rugby, for all intents and purposes, is done and dusted. A lot of conflicting stuff. I mean, you've got Springboks that are in England that wouldn't have to isolate if they played in that competition. You've got Ninaber that doesn't want to play in New Zealand. Let's try and unmuddy the waters for people out there and give an idea of what we think is going to happen and why.
Look, I think COVID has forced Super Rugby's
Demise
and its end. And they've been trying to slap band-aids on Super Rugby for the last 5-6 years. New Zealand played their own competition. You would realistically see an Australian-New Zealand competition as a Super Rugby competition with potentially Japan involved. And you'd see South Africa either then going into an expanded Pro 14 into a Pro 16, maybe even a Pro 18 if you then include the Jaguares who could potentially be basing themselves in the UK and playing there. So as a given, I would say the future of South Africa's domestic and regional game will be in the UK, and we've spoken about that for the last few months.
Will that, if you look at what the Super Rugby tried to do is expand too quickly, would that have a negative impact on the Pro 12 rugby as it was known then?
Look, there was a lot of interest with the Cheetahs going in, and you speak to the organisers and that the Kings were a poor addition because of the quality of the side. Yeah. But if you have in the top 4 South African super franchises playing there with all their Springboks, it immediately takes that competition and puts it right up there with the top 14, with the Premiership. And it's always been lagging there. It's always seen as the poor country cousin. So I think it would be fantastic for it. And it would be the precursor for potentially an expansion of the Six Nations to something more that would include South Africa if there wasn't an agreement reached for South Africa to continue in the Rugby Championship. And my understanding is that Super Rugby will be no more. Our teams will go north in terms of a franchise level, but the Springboks will always play in the Rugby Championship and the Six Nations will stay as is for now. That has been the talk consistently for the last few months. But something we spoke about just before the show started is nothing stops South Africa from committing to the 8 nations and picking exclusively based Northern Hemisphere players that are playing in France, playing in Italy, playing in the United Kingdom and Ireland, and saying we will have a team that plays it, because the competition structure is they play against Scotland, they would play against Italy and France. And the winner of that group plays in the final against potentially the Wales in England or an Ireland on the other side. So it makes for a wonderful tournament, and your players have been playing them they would have been playing for the last 6 weeks. They will be conditioned, and your only people who you'd have to fly over basically would be the director of rugby and the Springbok coach and a support team. They could also split the duties and just back themselves to get to New Zealand somehow and play a South African-based team. Interestingly, though, Yuri Roos said that this is one particular thing that they will be guided by the National Director of Rugby, Rassie Erasmus, and the Springbok coach, Jacques Nienaber. And as you started the show, you said Jacques Nienaber has been fairly vocal to say, if we don't get 6 domestic games here, if we don't get a camp together, if we don't do this, we're not going over there because we'd be on a hiding to nothing. We'd be beaten
even from Australia.
We'd be beaten to a pulp by New Zealand. Australia's been playing for the last 3 months, and they're very particular about not losing that appeal pre the Lions next year and walking into an ambush and getting slaughtered. So everything from a rugby decision points to, if there's going to be Springbok rugby this year, it's going to be in that 8-team tournament because Japan has pulled out, and it does make sense. Time travel, if they do pick a combined side, or even worst case scenario, our game doesn't get started in time. Rassie and Jacques could pick a very, very competitive side from players based over there, knowing that you've got another squad of 30 players here, so the public would see it in that context. So it's not just a money response from Yuri Rue and the SAR executive. It's saying this has got to serve the purposes of the world champion Springboks, especially leading into what is going to be the biggest rugby extravaganza the British and Irish Lions being here next year. But what I did love is that there is movement and there is talk. And I can tell you now, the guy who runs World Rugby is Bernard Laporte. And if Bernard Laporte has said, we've spoken to South Africa, it's an advanced stage, you can be certain there's a good amount of cash that's coming South Africa's way. Because it was Bernard Laporte who got on a jet and flew everywhere and said, give me 2 weeks and this recommendation will be overturned for who will host the 2023 World Cup. And my goodness, it was overturned very quickly when the council voted. So he has huge influence, huge backing, and I think South Africa see themselves aligning more and more with the North. And with him being the vice chair to Billy Beaumont now, he's going to take over from Beaumont. He's going to be the most influential person in world rugby. So rather get into bed with the devil you know than the devil you don't know.
But I thought they knew the devil in the Southern Hemisphere.
They really don't know which devil they do know, but it's...
I just think the South African public wants some clarity. They want some sort of understanding what they can build and get behind. Now, if it was up to me, and nothing's up to me anymore, I would look at the North. I wouldn't be, obviously they're keeping 2 feet, 1 foot there, 1 foot there, as you guys used to. I used to get called the salt pill. It's kind of, the Springboks become a bit of a salt pill, but a bigger extension.
Exactly.
I guess I see what they're doing, but it would be the North. Makes the sense. We've got a lot of players there that have been playing for a few weeks. By the time the 8 Nations come around, they'll have been playing for 6 weeks. They'll have been conditioned. So the only people left to quarantine is Rassie and Niba.
Look, and you want to keep the Rugby Championship and the history of it in the professional age. You'd love to be playing as the Springboks, the All Blacks every year. But if you do commit to the North exclusively, and it does evolve into an expanded 7 or 8 nations, as we now see the traditional 6 nations, nothing prohibits the All Blacks being on the radar to tour South Africa every 3 years, and South Africa tours them every 5 years or something, and that could bring back the lure of matches between between South Africa and New Zealand and Australia, which it doesn't necessarily lose its appeal, but it isn't quite the occasion that it used to be, because there's twice a year we play the All Blacks, and also Australia, but more so the All Blacks. So I think it's an all-win situation for South Africa. They really are the strongest ones out of the Sanzo Alliance when it comes to this negotiation, because the only one that it makes sense for to play in the Northern Hemisphere geographically is South Africa. Australia can't go there, New Zealand can't go there. And the money is in the North, without a doubt. And I think the minute you put those top 4 Super Rugby franchises into a competition up there, and from that the potential is that the top 2 then qualify for the Champions tournament, where massive money is involved in that. The fabric of the game will be financially so much wealthier and healthier in this country. And
but what happens to the poor Free State Cheetahs?
I think they will still be accommodated somehow in another tournament. I know that the plan was always to involve all 8 of the provinces / franchises, which included Griquas and also the Pumas, and to get them all playing internationally. The initial thing was 4 in the North, 4 in the traditional Super Rugby. So I think there will be a solution for them, for the Kings as well. But the key is getting our best 4 teams over there, and them being successful immediately elevates why South Africa is in those competitions. And unfortunately, because of the hiding to nothing that the Kings were on, people thought, the Kings, is this what South African rugby is about? We all knew it wasn't. We know South African players have always been massively in demand in the UK and in Europe. And I just, we've had Super Rugby. It was fantastic when it started, Super 12. Tri-Nations was a fantastic tournament. The game's evolved. The marketplace has completely shifted, and our future is definitely in the North. And don't be surprised if South Africa is not in New Zealand, and don't be surprised if South Africa is playing in that 8-nation tournament. And we can thank Japan for that. we did them a lot of good things. In 2015, they may have done us the biggest favour by pulling out of this Eight Nation tournament.
Yep, I agree. And I think that logically, that's what has to happen. Not that we're playing in an Eight Nations every year. I like the championship. I think, but for this year, in a year that's gone mad, it's understandable. I mean, even if we played in the championship, we still have to go over there. There's a lot of ifs for it to happen. Whereas there's a lot less ifs for us to just play in an Eight Nations for this year. You've got easier games. No offense to any of the teams, but let's be honest, Italy. We've got easier games. It protects the Boks brand coming out of a World Cup where we're the World Cup champions. Why go to New Zealand and get pumped?
And it also just kind of just puts that South African / Springbok footprint, makes it even stronger in the Northern Hemisphere. And I love the concept of a Stormers playing against different teams, and going potentially into a European competition where you don't know who's actually going to come. Every year the draw changes, and it's just, the variety is just something that's unmatched. Where you play Super Rugby, it's Crusaders here one year, you're away the next year. And with the greatest respect to kind of the tournament, you know that you're out of that tournament after 6 or 7 rounds. Where up north, with their leagues, those leagues are so competitive, that thing goes into round number 20. And then the way they play the knockout tournament, which is also good for us in terms of World Cups, is you're playing 2 types of tournaments. You're playing a league, and your players are getting accustomed to a pool type system, but then it's knockouts, quarterfinals, semifinals, or final, or you're home. So it's just an all-win situation for me from a South African point of view. But what it also gives it so much more meat now is that they do arrive as the world champions, not ranked 7th in the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Mark. I hope we're playing in the north, and for this year, and I hope that it all gets sorted out soon, so the South African fans can understand what exactly that they've got to look forward to.
And also from just a viewing perspective, there's a 1 to / 2 hours, depending when they turn the clocks back, time difference. So you're watching games at 3 in the afternoon, 5 in the afternoon, 7 in the afternoon. You're not watching a 9:30 in the morning kickoff, or potentially a 5 o'clock in the morning kickoff. So it just makes that whole international timetable from 2 p.m. in the afternoon till 10 p.m., which is the most sought after broadcasting slot. It just makes it perfect for South African rugby.
Absolutely, and not to mention the fact from a travel point of view of inbound travel fans and us going outbound to spend a week in Ireland.
Yeah, and also player welfare. The fatigue factor just is completely taken away from the travel demands that our players currently have by spending 5 weeks away, flying to Australia, New Zealand, Argentina backwards and forwards, and then going back for the Rugby Championship, and then an end-of-year tour. So when you look at it like that, there's very little that you would say should keep South Africa in the current SANZO alliance.
I couldn't agree more.
Thanks, Kev.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.